Greetings and good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight in person and virtually for those who are joining us via YouTube. Our District 4 Commissioner Steve Bradshaw, as the newly appointed Finance Audit and Budget Committee Chair, created a series of 3 informational community meetings about the budget process and the goals for 2023. Commissioner Bradshaw's goal is to afford constituents the opportunity to engage in the DeKalb County budget process. He held the very first community budget meeting on Wednesday, January 25th at the Stonecrest Library. The last meeting that will be held later next week, Wednesday, February 15th, will begin at 6 p.m. at the Dunwoody Library. Please tell your friends and neighbors if they weren't able to make this meeting and they want to take that drive to Dunwoody, that there will be the last and final meeting on the budget that the Commissioner will be hosting. Tonight, TJ Siegler, Director of DeKalb County's Office of Management and Budget, will provide an overview of the CEO, Michael Thurman's proposed 2023 budget and the process for creating the budget. Siegler will take you through some of the key components of the county's operational budget. You may access the budget by scanning the QR code on the flyer that was at the table where Robin is sitting at the sign-in desk, and or visit DeKalbCountyGA.gov/budget. Please join me in welcoming the Finance Audit and Budget FAB Committee Chair, Commissioner Steve Bradshaw. And before I turn the mic over, I didn't say who I was. Some of you I introduced when you were coming in, but I am Alicia Brooks. I serve as Commissioner Bradshaw's Chief of Staff. And thank you again for coming.
All right. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. Oh, that was horrible. We're going to reload. We're going to try again. Good evening, everybody. Good evening. A little bit better. Thank you so much for coming out this evening. I know everybody has busy lives. There are plenty of other things you could be doing on a Wednesday evening, but that you are here is a testament to your interest in your community, and we certainly do appreciate it. My name is Steve Bradshaw. I have the honor of representing District 4 on the Board of Commissioners and the honor of chairing the Finance Audit and Budget Committee this year, affectionately known as FAB. Now, the DeKalb County Organizational Act requires that the CEO submit a budget proposal to the Board of Commissioners by December the 15th of every year. And then we, in turn, have until March 1st to either adopt it, reject it, or amend it. And what we normally do is adopt the budget with amendments, and that is the exercise that we're going through right now. Now, regarding the budget, we have a regular public hearing process, which is proceeding as normal. However, everyone does not have the opportunity to attend a regular Board of Commissioners meeting at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday morning in downtown Decatur. Nor does everyone have the opportunity to attend a Finance Audit and Budget Committee meeting at 3:30 p.m. on Tuesday afternoon. So therefore, as Budget Chair for this year, I thought it would be appropriate to bring this process to the people, so to speak. So hence, we've scheduled a few community meetings for that purpose. This is the second, and we're so happy to be here in the city of Tucker. Now, our esteemed Budget Director, TJ Siegler, will be leading us through the presentation, and I will be yielding the floor to him momentarily. But before I go any further, I want to first thank our Library Director, Allison Weisinger, for the job that her and her team do and for opening up the libraries for this series of meetings. I want to thank the staff here at the Cofer Library for hosting us this evening. I would also like to thank our IT Director, John Metelsky, and his team for putting everything in place to make sure we could do this both in person and virtually. And I also want to thank my buddies at DCTV for always being there to support us. Now, these guys do a great job. They have questionable allegiances in terms of professional football teams, but we're going to set that aside for the moment, okay? Now, at this time, I want to acknowledge my BOC colleagues who are here and who are also fellow committee members with me on FAB. Our more tenured member on that committee, Commissioner Lorraine Cochran-Johnson. If you would like to address the crowd in any way, the floor is yours.
I
I know everyone wants to get to the good stuff, so the numbers, and thank you all for coming out, because most people don't get in the weeds, as I said, when you all begin to walk in. Of course, this is, as Commissioner Bradshaw said, budget time, and it is during this time that we set the course of direction for the year to come through our appropriations. So thank you all for being here. Of course, the budget is a direct reflection, or should be, of the needs of the community. As my grandfather says, you can tell a person's priority by where they put their time and their money. So what you'll see here, of course, there are large allocations, of course, in public safety that you will notice. I'm not sure how detailed we will go today, but of course, operations, our constitutional officers, and that's what we're here to do, is have a good and balanced budget that has resulted in over a larger rainy day fund than we've ever had in the history of DeKalb County, $110 million. So thank you to Commissioner Bradshaw for the leadership, and happy to serve on the Finance, Audit, and Budget Committee.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Cochran-Johnson. And I also want to acknowledge our presiding officer and fellow FAB committee member, Commissioner Robert Patrick. If there's anything you'd like to say to the crowd, Robert, the floor is yours.
Nice to meet everyone here this evening. Appreciate you all coming out for Commissioner Bradshaw's idea here of sort of going to the public and talking to you guys directly about what's the priorities that the county has, and make sure that they square up with what your priorities are. So thank you very much for being here. Commissioner Cochran-Johnson, very thorough, sort of hit all the high parts. Everything I would say she's already said. So again, the budget reflects what their priorities are that we have for the county, and hopefully we're trying to listen to you as close as possible to get it done. Things like permitting, timeframes on turnarounds for permits being issued, either those development permits, grease trap permits, so that your restaurants can open up. Those are important things, and those are priorities that we take a look at. We had some discussions about the permitting system. I think it was also in the committee of the whole, as well as in PWI. Those are things that we pay attention to, so that the services that either as a resident or as a business are delivered in a timely manner. When y'all yell at us, we yell at that man right there. Joking aside, but Zach does a lot of the heavy work, I guess, for us to make sure that whatever concerns that you guys express to us, we get those addressed, and the budget is the best way to make sure that happens. So with that, Commissioner Bradshaw, thank you very much. I'm going to turn it back over to you.
All right, thank you. And I want to acknowledge all the other elected officials who are here from the state capitol, Representative Viola Davis, and we got almost a quorum of the Tucker City Council here, Virginia Reese, Ann Lerner, esteemed Mayor Frank Allman, former council member Michelle Pincava. Am I missing any other elected officials this evening? And of course, we're happy to have our Chief Operating Officer, Zach Williams, here. He's got a heavy load. We don't make it any lighter, but it's all good. So, and of course, you know, I'd be remiss if I didn't thank the team that works with me in the District 4 office. It'd be impossible for me to discharge the duties of this office without them. Robin Fleeg, who's our constituent services coordinator, who's up front. Carrie Cordes, who's our communication specialist, and all of our bosses, Alicia Brooks, who's the chief of staff. She keeps us all straight. So before I yield the floor to TJ, who will go through the nuts and bolts of the presentation, I want to make just a few general comments. So the first thing I want to say is this. We as elected officials are charged with being responsible stewards of the taxpayers' money. It's not our money. It's the taxpayers' money. And this is something that I take very, very seriously. Now, over the past several years, overall, I think DeKalb County's finances have been managed in a competent and fiscally responsible manner. But since I've been in office, I've come to learn that no matter how much money any governmental entity may have, the need always seems to be greater than the available resources. The need always seems to be greater than the available resources, which means in jobs like these, it's about setting priorities and making sure that those priorities are funded at the proper level. Now, I started my professional life as a United States Army officer, and my first company commander, Captain Alvin Hundley, used to always say to me, "Steve, if everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority. If everything is a priority, then nothing is a priority." Now, what do y'all think he meant by that?
Pick your battles.
Pick your battles, that's a good term of art. Anybody else want to take a swing?
Tyranny of the urgent is what that sounds like.
Well, okay, that's a good term of art. Anybody else? Well, not to belabor the point, what it distills to is there's not enough money to fund everything to the level that we might like. And that means occasionally disappointing some people, because everybody's priorities are not the same. They're not. And that's why we come together in these governmental entities to try to achieve consensus over what we fund and at what level. So my first budget vote was back in 2017. I think that first budget set DeKalb County on a new course of fiscal responsibility. And I commend CEO Thurman for his stewardship of our money. Now, CEO Thurman has said on occasion that I was the deciding vote on that budget back in 2017. Now, I don't know if that's true. I'd have to go back and check the tape. Whether it's true or not, I'm very proud of that very first budget vote. Very, very proud. And in addition to passage and oversight of the overall budget for the county, each commissioner has an office budget that we are allocated every year. Now, going back to my time when I was a soldier, the end of the year is approaching, and if you haven't spent all the money that you're allocated, you all of a sudden start running around trying to spend money, so next year your budget's not less. And I always thought that was a horrible practice. And since I've been in office as a commissioner, I've never done that. In fact, I've returned money from my office budget to the general fund every single year that I've been in office, because it's not my money. It's the taxpayers' money. Now, during my private sector days, I learned that the numbers have to work. Right? For any entity to have sustained success, the numbers have to work. And making the numbers work is a very big job. So I commend TJ and the folks in our finance and budget departments for their diligence and their hard work in trying to make the numbers work. At a fundamental level, depending on the size of any organization, a budget can be a highly technical and complicated document. DeKalb County's budget is a large budget, complicated with lots of numbers. Sometimes I'm looking at so many numbers, my eyes start to glaze over with the numbers. But hopefully TJ will help to demystify at least some of our budget process. And then at another level, budgets are moral documents, in that they are a statement about who we are and what we value. And hopefully this point will come through as well. So with that, I will end my commentary, and I will yield the floor to the person you're really here to see, which is our budget director, TJ Siegler. Come on up, TJ.
Thank you, Commissioner, and good evening, everyone. So tonight we're going to go through this presentation, which kind of gives you a broad overview of the budget process, as well as some details about the proposed budget for 2023. So the Commissioner's comments, introductory comments, did a very good job of framing this discussion about our budget process. So again, my name is TJ Siegler. I'm the Director of the Office of Management and Budget. So when people think of a budget, they normally think of the numbers. They think of it as a financial plan. But really, it's more than that. It is a financial plan, but it's also a policy document and a communications tool for the public, as well as an operational guide. So a good budget tells you, what we're going to do, how we're going to do it, and why. think we're having some technical difficulties here. Can you? I'm fairly sure I know what the next bullet point was, and that's basically that the budget process involves priorities, as has been said repeatedly tonight, setting priorities and figuring out, how to allocate the resources we have among those competing priorities. As Commissioner Bradshaw said, there's not enough money to go around for everything. We know that everything that the county does is important, but we have to make trade-offs and decide what is the most important use for our resources. Okay, just a little background about the Office of Management and Budget. You also hear it called OMB, or just the Budget Office. So prior to 2015, the Budget Office was part of the Department of Finance. But in 2015, it was spun off as its own independent department. And we report directly to the COO as well as the CEO. And what our role entails is helping to prepare the CEO's recommended budget, which is required by law to be presented to the Board of Commissioners by December 15th of each year. And then we kind of work through the budget process, kind of shepherd it, the budget along, going to the public hearings and, meeting with commissioners and going to the committee hearings on the budget. And then once the budget's adopted, our role shifts to more of an oversight role, where we, keep track of expenditures on a monthly basis. We do expenditure projections, just in order to catch anything before, it becomes an issue. Another important role for our office is coordinating the setting of the millage rates. And the millage rates, if you're unfamiliar with that term, is just the rate that you pay for property taxes. And then, also in the course of our business is where we provide information and research to the CEO and other elected officials as requested. All right, so this is just a basic org chart for us. So my entire office, myself included, consists of seven employees, 7 positions. So that's 7 positions that's responsible for basically a $1.7 billion annual operating budget. All right, and this is just a simple diagram of what the budget process and the budget cycle looks like. So the start of it is the department submitting their budget request for the year. That usually happens sometime in the fall. And from that point, we in the budget office review their request and make our own preliminary recommendations, and then work with the CEO to finalize his recommendation that goes to the Board of Commissioners. And as I mentioned, that occurs December 15th of every year. And then between that December 15th date and prior to March 1 is when the Board of Commissioners is able to review the budget, and we hold public hearings and so forth. So that's the point we are at right now. Once it's adopted, kind of the next step is the review of the and setting of the millage rates. So sometime in the spring, typically late May, early June, we'll get the property tax digest and start to figure out what the millage rates need to be for that year to cover our operations. So once that's developed, that's reviewed and adopted by the Board of Commissioners kind of midsummer, typically I think the first meeting in July. And from that point, the cycle starts all over again. All right, so the basic building blocks of the county budget, just so you're familiar with them, are departments and funds. So the department is the legal level of control. So basically when the budget is adopted, it's adopted at the department level. So when I get a budget for my office, that bottom line number is the legal number. So that allows some flexibility in being able to move some money around within that dollar amount. And then every department budget is part of a fund. And so a fund is basically a grouping of departments based on how they're paid for. So we have tax funds, we have enterprise funds, and I'll get into that a little bit more in just a minute. But state law requires a balanced budget at the fund level for each fund. So what that means is we can't exceed the amount of revenue or fund balance that we have. Basically we cannot run a deficit. Okay, this is just an illustration again of how the budget's structured. So at the top we have the fund class, which that's the type of funds, enterprise funds, tax funds. And then below that you'll see the actual funds that make that fund class up. So this example has the enterprise funds. And then for each of the funds you have the departments that are part of it. Okay, the tax funds are kind of the major part of the operating budget that most people think about when they think about the county budget. And so it's what funds, the majority of our operations annually. So we have, I think, a total of 7 different tax funds. 6 of them are active right now. The first one being the general fund, and so that is to fund countywide operations. It's funded through a property tax as well as other taxes. And so that would include things like the court system, the sheriff's office, all the administrative departments of the county. And then the police fund is fairly self-explanatory. That's the what's used to fund police services in the county. Let me back up just a minute. The general fund, because that is a countywide, funds countywide operations, the millage rate that's levied for the general fund is levied countywide. So it doesn't matter whether you're living in the unincorporated area or in a city, every resident, every property owner in DeKalb County would pay the millage rate for the general fund. So the police fund also has a millage rate, but unlike the general fund, it depends on where you live in the county and whether the county provides police services in your area as to what the millage rate is or whether you pay the millage rate at all. So that would apply to all of unincorporated DeKalb, a few of the cities, and then some of the cities have elected to do partial participation within the police fund. So that's where it gets interesting. It gets complicated, so I won't bore you with that. The fire district, again, is to provide fire services throughout the county. The exceptions there are Decatur and the city of Atlanta, who have their own fire departments. So they would not pay the millage rate for the fire district, but everyone else in the county would. Designated is very similar to the police fund, where it depends on whether you live in the unincorporated area or one of the cities, whether or not the county provides service to you and whether or not you're subject to the millage rate for that. And designated services is not as clear or as obvious a name as the others. So what that includes is our parks as well as transportation and roads and drainage. And then unincorporated fund is a little bit different from the rest on this list because unlike the others, there is no property tax associated with the unincorporated fund. So 100% of the revenues that are generated through the unincorporated fund come from other sources. So that includes our business licenses, our insurance premium tax, and basically all those are only collected or they're generated based on unincorporated population or collected in the unincorporated areas. Okay, the last 3 of the tax funds are the hospital fund, which that is another countywide fund, and that goes to provide, to support indigent care through Grady Memorial Hospital. Countywide bonds, that's the one that I mentioned is inactive. That was to fund some debt, some general obligation debt that was issued, I couldn't tell you how many years ago, but we retired that debt several years ago, so we're no longer levying a millage rate for the countywide bonds. And then the unincorporated bonds are similar in the case to the countywide bonds. They're general obligation bonds that were issued, I think back in 2006 were the last time we issued those. And unincorporated bonds is a bit of a misnomer because it includes really everywhere in the county that was unincorporated when the bonds were issued. So at the time, this was before Tucker or Dunwoody or Brookhaven, any of the new cities incorporated, so they would still be subject to the millage rate for those bonds. All right, moving on to the enterprise funds. What those are funds that function more like a business would, where the revenue that they generate through fees or charges is what is used to then run the business. So those include our water and sewer system, our stormwater utility, sanitation, and PDK airport. So I think those are fairly straightforward. You pay your water bill, and then that's what goes to then fund the operations of the water and sewer system. Okay, the internal service funds, these are funds that get their revenue basically from all the other county funds that use them. So we have the risk management fund, workers' comp, vehicle replacement, fleet management are the four internal service funds. So to give you an example of how that works, every department that has vehicles pays a certain amount vehicle replacement charge into the vehicle replacement fund. So when that vehicle is at the end of its useful life, there's funding available to then replace the vehicle. Same thing, they pay fleet management charges to cover any sort of maintenance or repairs for the vehicles as well. All right, special revenue funds, I won't go through all those because it's a long list, but those are anything that have sort of a dedicated revenue source that's for a specific purpose. The two that I normally hit on are the 911 fund. So that, most of its revenue is generated through the 911 fees that are charged on your telephone bill. And so that's a dedicated revenue. We can't use that for anything other than 911 services. And the development fund is what is funded through the, the fees for inspections and, any sort of development permits that are required. And then the last part of the operating budget, the annual operating budget, is our revenue bond funds. And so these are, again, debt funds where we've issued some sort of bond for a specific purpose. But unlike the countywide or the unincorporated bonds, these don't have a millage rate associated with it. So they're paid through revenue of the other funds. Okay, so shifting into the 2023 budget, CEO Thurman's priorities for this budget are public safety, retention, hiring, and training, community health and well-being, beautification and placemaking, and sustain and improve county-owned assets. And each of these next slides are broken up, there's a slide for each one of the priorities. Again, I'm not going to read everything off this, but it has a brief description of what the priority is, and then some of the highlights of items that are funded in the budget for each of those priorities. So you see that there's $9.7 million in the budget to fund 222 positions in the police department, about $9.2 million in the fire rescue department to fund 158 vacant positions. There's $5.4 million in the sheriff's office to fund 123 vacant positions. Superior Court has $600,000 to continue some of the violence prevention programs that they started under the American Rescue Plan. And then code compliance has $547,000 to hire and equip 6 new code compliance officers. All right, retention, hiring, and training. This has been a big issue for us for the last several years, with the Great Resignation and just the overall tightness in the labor market. To combat that, we've had a series of COLAs over the last 2 years. There was a 4% COLA last year, and we're proposing another 4% COLA this year. The total cost for that in 2023 is $8.4 million. We also have $170,000 for training, professional development, and dues. And I don't have a dollar amount here, but the annualization of, the last bullet point is for the annualization of the compensation enhancements provided in 2022. So that doesn't show up as new spending, but it is a big part of what accounts for the increase this year in the county budget. All right, under community health and well-being, we have $800,000 to purchase and equip 5 vehicles for mobile integrated health community paramedicine program. Human Services is getting an additional $1.5 million to provide meals at senior centers, as well as to fund 13 positions. Parks has about $1.9 million proposed for therapeutic programming and other adaptive recreation and facilities and so forth. And then beautification and placemaking. That includes just under $1 million for vehicles and equipment for our beautification unit. The planning department has about $655,000 for matching funds for grants and various small area plans and studies. We're increasing the funding for Decide DeKalb, our development authority, through economic development by $500,000, as well as proposing $100,000 for the Chamber of Commerce Small Business Recovery Program. And then sanitation, there's $6.6 million proposed for new vehicles and equipment, as well as funding 115 positions in other operational enhancements. All right, next on the list is sustain and improve county-owned assets. This has been a big priority for several years and probably bigger this year than it ever has been. In capital improvement projects, we've proposing $51.4 million for capital contributions, and that includes potential projects at the courthouse, the county jail, a lot of technology improvements, as well as capital projects for sanitation, mainly the expansion of the landfill. Throughout the budget, there's just over $3 million budgeted for computers and technology upgrades, and that's across multiple different departments. And then vehicle additions, it's about $500,000 there for vehicle additions for various county departments as well. Oops. All right, and so this is just a timeline for the 2022 budget, or 2023, excuse me. So the budget priorities and instructions were sent out to departments on December 2nd. They were required to return those requests to us by December 9th, and then we, in turn, developed the budget recommendation and submitted that to the Board of Commissioners on December 15th. So as mentioned before, we're holding 3 of these public information meetings. This is the second of 3. And then we're also having 2 public hearings on the budget. One is next Thursday, the 16th of February, and then the second will be February 28th, which is also when we are scheduled to adopt the budget. So between now and then, we're going to continue to have committee meetings discussing departmental budgets. There's more than likely going to be amendments to the budget, but the budget itself will be adopted February 28th. All right, this is just a breakdown of the proposed budget by the different fund classes. So you'll see that the tax funds are 51% of the total operating budget, followed by the enterprise funds at 30%, internal services funds at 17%, and then the special revenue funds and the revenue bond funds just make up maybe a little over 2%. All right, and this is how the revenue for the tax funds breaks down by fund. So the largest part is the general fund at 58%, and then followed by police fund and fire fund, and then the other funds make up the rest. This is where the revenue for the tax funds comes from. So this largest piece here, the 53.7%, that is from property taxes. The next largest in blue is our e-host. And e-host is a sales tax. It stands for the Equalized Homestead Option Sales Tax. And the way that works is really an offset to property taxes. So the revenue that's generated through e-host is used to provide a credit on property tax bills for homestead properties. So in the last several years, it's provided 100% credit to homestead properties for the general fund and the hospital fund, which are the two county-wide funds that have millage rates. Then from there, other taxes are 13%, and then lots of other smaller categories make up the rest. I know this is really small, but this is just showing the proposed budget for the tax funds. The first column has our projected fund balance, and so the fund balance is just how much money, you can think about it as how much money we have in the bank to start the year. And then we have our revenues that we're projecting for the year, and then expenses, which we break down between recurring and non-recurring. And then finally, our reserves. And so our policy, the official county policy, is to have 1 month's, the equivalent of 1 month of expenditures reserved. The CEO has made it his goal, and we've achieved it, to reach 2 months of fund balance for the tax funds. So we're at 2.1 months reserved in the proposed budget. This is just another table showing the breakdown of the proposed budget by fund class and what the change was. So overall, the 23 budget as proposed is $1.7 billion, which is a 9.3% increase over the 2022 budget. This is the tax digest. I mentioned it in passing earlier in the presentation, but the tax digest is just the total value of all taxable property in the county. So those blue bars show the gross tax digest. So all property is assessed at 40%, so that would be the 40% value of all taxable property in the county. And then the green bars is the net tax digest. So that's the gross digest minus any exemptions, so homestead exemptions, senior exemptions, anything like that. So that's really the number that we in the budget office are concerned with, because that's the number that we use to then calculate what the millage rates need to be to generate the revenue for the current year. And I'm not sure if you can see it so well on this chart, but that gap between the gross and the net digest is growing over the years. And a big reason for that is we have a assessment freeze exemption in DeKalb County. So if you have a homestead exemption, then you likely have the freeze exemption as well. So what that means is when that exemption is first applied, your home value is set as your base year. And then each year, even if your house is appreciating in value, if the assessment is going up, you receive an exemption in the amount of what that would increase your taxes over that base value in the first year that you had that applied to your house. And then this is just another way of looking at the tax digest, showing the percent change year over year in both the gross and the net. And that last 2 bars there is what we're projecting for 2023. So we have fairly conservative projections built into the budget, especially compared to last year. You know, what we've seen and what we've heard from tax assessors that, you know, the real estate market is cooling down. You know, it's still, you know, we're not back to the Great Recession where the bottom's falling out, but it's just growing, you know, more slowly than it has been. And the final slide here, and this is one that we always like to close on, is just our ending fund balance for the tax funds. And we started at 2010 because that was kind of the low point for DeKalb County. You know, during the Great Recession, we actually ended the year with a fund balance of negative $4 million. And so it's been, you know, a long road back, and you'll see in the first few years it just kind of bounced around a little bit, but really since 2016 we've seen a steady incline in what the fund balance has been in each year, with the exception of 2020, which is the outlier due to COVID and some of the revenue losses we saw there. And then for 2021, or 2022, excuse me, the ending fund balance, what we projected was $201 million. So yeah, that's much higher than I think it's ever been. It was a little higher than we anticipated. And that is a projection, so that number is likely to change. But that was really just a result of some of the funding that was approved in 2022 not being implemented. And so a lot of that's then being carried over to this year's budget as well. All right, and finally, this is just the website where you can find budget information. So we put up presentations that we give like this, as well as the proposed budget and, our budget document, our annual budget document, which we produce after the budget's adopted. And it's about a 400-page document that has all sorts of detail and information. So if you're ever really bored, you can go and read that. So that's the end of my presentation. So I'll turn it back over, I guess, to Alicia.
Yep, you can hold the mic.
All right. I'll get off that easy.
You do not. Thank you, TJ. Thank you for the detailed presentation. We appreciate you. I just want to remind our YouTube viewers that when you're watching, please click on the title for the link for the presentation. That will take you into the chat, and we'll be able to see your questions, and Carrie is going to help me get to those questions. But we'll open it up to our audience here tonight. If anybody has any questions of TJ and the budget or the commissioner, let's go for it. Yes, ma'am, you ready?
Sure. I'll take this off. I'm curious about where you can get information about the specific departments and their individual budget and what that budget is based on, and how that's grown or not grown over the years. Is there that kind of information available?
Typically, yes, and we're working to produce that for this year. We had a few hiccups in getting all the reports done this year, but I hesitate to say it because I thought we'd have it by now, but I think by the end of this week we should have that information, and it'll be posted on the website. So, and basically what you'll do is if you click on the proposed budget, it kind of starts out with some summary tables showing, the big picture, kind of like we talked about here, and then gradually gets into more detail. So, eventually what we call them are the blue sheets, and those are the department detail sheets. So they're not there yet, but they will be.
All right. Anyone else?
Thank you. That was amazing. I'm glad people like you exist. Is there a way to know what budget figure was requested by each department so we could determine, for example, the sheriff, she might have asked for a 5% increase and only 1.9 was granted. And the second question is, and you may not know the answer to this, how do we know how the money is used by individual departments, or who is overseeing how the money is used in individual departments?
So answer the first question of whether or not you'd be able to see the requested amounts. Yes, they are part of those blue sheets that I just referred to. So that'll be available. It's not there yet, but it will be available. And then I guess your other questions were to see who is responsible and what has been done with the funding. Is that?
Yeah, so if the sheriff gets $87 million or whatever it is, how do we follow up to see how that money was used by her department?
So the budget itself does have some history as far as what was spent in previous years. And it may, depending on the department, have additional detail about, how it was spent. But yeah, that might not be something that's just readily available publicly. But if it's, It is public information, so if you have questions like that, that's something you can request, and we could, we could get that for you. I think maybe you have something to add.
So you can get the payroll, so that's easy, right? You can run the payroll for any department and see how they spent their funds. And then you can also run an Oracle report to see what goods and services they purchase. So although it doesn't currently exist in one document, the information is certainly, you can get it. You can get them.
Is that something that you and the chief executive officer review?
So the payroll on an ongoing basis, you have a couple different things. So with constitutionals, when their funds are allotted, when the board appropriates their funds, it's really for them to spend, right? So unless they're coming in asking for a change of significance, we don't on a daily basis really go in and review theirs. With our operating departments, we're much closer to it. But as the budget director, TJ, indicated at the outset, the departments are responsible for managing their budgets at a departmental level. And so unless there is some anomaly, there's not really much cause for us to get involved. But on an ongoing basis, they will ask for things like in-grade adjustments and things like that for their staff. And so that would cause us to really review how they're spending their personnel dollars. And then the contracts, any contracts have to go through the CEO to the Board of Commissioners, so we have visibility at that time. So it's a pretty hands-on process.
All right. Any other questions? Yeah.
Prior to being elected, I remember us doing an open records for the amount of money that we're collecting from like Comcast in the form of franchise fees. So are we still in unincorporated collecting PEG fee and franchise fees?
We are. The amount, I think, has declined over time, especially as new cities are incorporated. The franchise fees, I want to say, are somewhere in the neighborhood of about $6 million a year recently. The PEG fees are much lower than that. I think usually about $50,000, currently, or in recent years.
What is PEG?
PEG stands for Public Education and Government Access, and so it's funding that's used to fund, DCTV, basically.
Any other questions? And while I'm walking over here, I also want to add that Commissioner Bradshaw has 2 upcoming special called FAB committee meetings. One next week, Thursday. I was trying to pull them up. But all of this.
16th, 23rd, and 27th.
Yeah, starting at 3:30.
16th is at 2 o'clock. I'm sorry. Forgive me. 16th, the FAB meeting on the 16th, I believe, is at 2 p.m. On the 23rd is at 3:30 p.m. And on the 27th is at 9 a.m.
And we'll post them and send that information out along our communication platforms.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to know, and while I appreciate all the work of just keeping operations going and keeping things continuing, is there anything that you all see as transformational in this year's budget that we should be watching out for? Or I saw the priorities for CEO Thurman. I saw public health being an initial one there. I saw 350 FTEs. I don't know if those are more new or mostly vacant. Is there a significant change in the ratios of officers to population or that kind of thing? Are there things that you guys consider, transformational or new and different that we're doing in the county that beyond what we've seen in the past?
Well, I think to answer your question about the FTEs, it's a mix of new and vacant positions. since you mentioned police, the issue that we've been having there is not that, we aren't funding enough officers, it's that we can't hire enough officers. So one thing that we did last year, and that's part of what I was alluding to as annualizing some of the salary increases, is we began offering higher starting salaries and increasing salaries for our police and fire personnel. And so, again, going back to last year's budget, I showed that the fund balance had grown quite a bit, and I think it was because we approved a lot of those adjustments in salary and, a lot of different programs in last year's budget, and the difficulty has been getting that money spent. So this year, I don't see as many of those, but it's really a continuation of a lot of the things that we were doing last year. I don't know.
All right.
I'm good. I'll go to the meeting. Do you know if there's a proposal, a hope, a dream of building a new jail?
No proposal yet. There have been discussions, but that would typically be a much bigger, it would be outside of the annual budget process. I think the last estimates I saw for a new jail are somewhere around $700 million, and I think I actually saw that Fulton County is looking at building a new jail, and their estimate was $1 billion. So that's going to be a much bigger conversation and than what we could address in just the annual budget.
Can I address that real quick? So there have been proposals that have been floated. As TJ said, that's going to be outside of our normal budget cycle and process, but I do intend, once that process is over, to invite the sheriff to come to a finance audit budget committee meeting and present her ideas on that front. But I wanted to get us past the budget season first. So.
My question kind of relates to the same thing. Would you help us understand, there was mention of constitutionals, which the sheriff is. So the board allocates money to the sheriff, but then it's sort of handed off in a way. Is that right? That within the sheriff's office, in this case, she is deciding how that money's spent and priorities and so on.
I mean, for every department that we budget for, which is all the departments, including the sheriff, we build it based on, assumptions of how that money is going to be used. And for departments that, report to the CEO has the, authority to say, no, you can't spend your money that way, or yes, this is how we're going to spend your, that money. Whereas constitutional officers, sheriff being one, I think the others are the tax commissioner, clerk of Superior Court, and then probate judge. Based on state law, they have a wide discretion to be able to use their budget however they see fit, and there's really not much legally that the county or the governing authority can do to say, no, you can't spend that. The role of the governing authority is mostly to set their, kind of that bottom line number, and, I guess the responsibility of the governing authority is to make sure that they have enough funding to perform their constitutional duties.
So I've been corrected on this multiple times by the sheriff. Sheriff's department is not a department of the county government. It's the sheriff's office. She has corrected me multiple times. The sheriff is a constitutional officer. She's elected by the people. So I think TJ did a great job of explaining it, but there is a distinction in terms of how much, authority, control, whatever your ward of choice is, that we can exert over a constitutional officer.
All right. Any other questions?
So just to follow up with that, is there something at the state level then that oversees how these constitutional officers spend their money.
Yeah, how they're governed how they're constituted is governed by, I'm sorry, I'm wicked at not grabbing the microphone. Yep, how they're governed is how they're managed, if you will, is covered by state law. So state law is what controls.
Any other questions? Okay.
If I may, I just want to, one quick thing, because the question regarding transformational things in the budget, and something that is really important, and we've talked a lot about, the fact is this is our 200-year anniversary of DeKalb County. And so you will see throughout the budget a lot of expenditures. We're focusing on sense of place. We've been doing beautification for the past number of years, but we're really looking to invest more in that, creating a sense of place, and helping promote DeKalb County for where we are now. And we talk a lot about, if you look at our history, a kind of a segregated past, right, to an integrated future. And so DeKalb County is expressing this next 200 years will continue the path that has been laid over the past number of decades that is inclusive for everyone. And so there's a committee that the CEO has put together. There's going to be investments in historical things and such. So it's kind of exciting because, we're doing all the nuts and bolts stuff, right? You would expect we're going to hire more police officers, we're going to pave the road stuff. But the investment in really promoting DeKalb County as a unique place, celebrating its 200-year anniversary and moving forward together, that's just something we're particularly proud of. Yep.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right, we got free budget reports for everybody, 400 pages, for those who came in person. Thank you, TJ, that was really good, appreciate you. All right, Commissioner, I think we've come to the end. We have folks viewing live on YouTube, but no questions have come through, and I think that's for two reasons. TJ did an excellent job with an overview, and then your questions here in the audience, I'm sure you helped some of the folks that were on YouTube who may have had very similar questions. So we'll turn it over to you.
Okay, let's give TJ another hand. He did an outstanding job. So the lines of communication are open. So if there are ongoing questions, you can contact my office. I'm sure I speak for my colleagues. You can contact any one of us with questions, and we're all in the foxhole together as we're trying to work through this process. So I'm grateful for your attendance tonight. Call on me at any time. When you call my office, you'll talk to Robin first, and she'll find out who it is and let me know if I need to take the call or not. So I'm just kidding. Yeah, by all means, the lines of communication are open. So thank you for your presence tonight, and, have a wonderful rest of your evening.